Hi gang, for the last time this year, don't forget to subscribe to The Joy of Football in order to get the most out of it. Go on the Patreon or follow us on substack.com where you can read what we've written, especially Martin Tyler's letters from the Gantry, which start today's podcast looking back at Nottingham Forest, Fulham, Arsenal, Everton and more.
And a section that we haven't done very often before, we're going to do it especially this time. You gave us the joy, we pay our tributes to the late John Robertson.
We've got feedback from you with squeaky noises and lots of opinions. Some of them lovely, some of them testing.
Most of them are lovely. And we say farewell to 2025 with various categories: most undervalued player, most improved player, most best summer signing, most entertaining player, and the best player. Lots of different names and lots of clubs that you've probably been following. You'd be interested to see whether your man is in the team.
The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for Schär. Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football.
Hello, the last recorded podcast of 2025, The Joy of Football, with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett. We start with letter from the Gantry, Martin Tyler's letter from the Gantry, which will segue into You Gave Us the Joy as we look back on a great football life. But first, Martin.
Letter from the Gantry.
Thank you, Neil. The last two Premier League games I saw before Christmas were cut from similar cloth. Everton versus Arsenal and Fulham versus Nottingham Forest produced 1 goal apiece. Both were penalties, converted in the first half, both by players regarded at each club as their main striker. Victor Gyokeres spelt victory for Arsenal. Raul Jimenez did the job for Fulham. Neither game produced classic football, but they both shared the same exciting narrative, the massive importance of the result. The consequence of Arsenal seeing the game out in the second half was a return to the top of the table, a position they'd lost to Manchester City earlier in the day. So they ensured that they would be top of the football charts at Christmas number 1. This was, incidentally, for Arsenal the 5th time in the Premier League era, but in none of the other 4 campaigns did they end up as champions. 3 times runners-up, and in the 07-08 season it was a 3rd place finish. When Arsenal last doubled up being in front on December the 25th and then clinching the title, they actually played on Christmas Day, winning 3-1 at Liverpool no less in the 1947-48 campaign. But after picking up just 2 points from their previous 3 away games, coming away with all 3 from their first visit to the Hill Dickinson Stadium seemed very significant in the moment for Arsenal. An apt way for Mikel Arteta to mark 6 years to the very day of the announcement that he would become the Arsenal boss. Against David Moyes too, the manager who'd brought Mikel into English football as a player and subsequently sold him to the Gunners, the start of his deep association with the North London club. Fulham's Monday night match 2 days later had ramifications at the other end of the table. Had Nottingham Forest won at Craven Cottage, they would have leapfrogged Marco Silva's side. Fulham would have been in the bottom 5, only 5 points above third from bottom West Ham, with a trip to come to the London Stadium for their final fixture of 2025. Holding on to their half-time lead made it anxious watching for the majority in a Fulham full house. Then came a calming influence with the introduction of Tom Cairney, a good friend of the Joy of Football, who showed great ability to knit together periods of possession and initiate enough counter-attacks to stop his side dropping too deep and inviting pressure. The club captain managed the closing stages expertly and showed why he still has value a month away from his 35th birthday. Tom was born in Nottingham too, which must have made the sound of the final whistle seem even sweeter. He wasn't born when I first saw Fulham play Forest in a drawn-out 4th round FA Cup tie which was scheduled for January the 25th, 1975, and it was eventually decided after 4 matches, 2 of which needed extra time, on Monday, February the 10th. The sequence was postponed through a waterlogged pitch, 0-0 at Craven Cottage, 1-1 after extra time at the City Ground, then a toss of the coin for a second replay with Fulham the beneficiaries of that, but 1-1 again with the extra 30 minutes being played, before back to Nottingham, where a 2-1 victory sent the London club into the 5th round, which was played only 5 days later. I mention this in detail for 2 reasons. Fulham, for the only time in their history, were on their way to the FA Cup final, belying their then status as a club in the old 2nd Division. It was the 50th anniversary of that feat back in May, and being invited to attend the players' reunion was one of my highlights of 2025. The other reason for recalling that epic 4th round battle is that watching the first of those 4 Forest ties with Fulham, the initial goalless draw at Craven Cottage, was the first time I saw John Robertson play. I think he wore the number 6 shirt and operated in midfield. He definitely didn't feature on the left wing where he was to make himself a legend at the City Ground. The media chat at the time was that he probably wouldn't fit the playing profile of the manager who'd taken over just a few weeks earlier, a certain Brian Clough. And Robertson was already on the transfer list. John Robertson was chunky of frame, even chubby, and seemingly prone to injury. The first of the 4th round contests against Fulham was also the first time John was selected by Clough. He even scored his first goal for Brian in the second replay, also at the Cottage, from a free kick. That muddy Craven Cottage pitch was the start of an amazing journey for the man always known as Robbo. For Forest's achievements over the next decade were simply miraculous. The Clough-Robertson relationship was at the very heart of it. John Robertson sadly left his family in a mourning football community on Christmas Day. The John Robertson who set up the winning goal for Trevor Francis in the 1979 European Cup final, who topped that even a year later by scoring himself the only goal of the 1980 final, ensuring that Forest retained the trophy. The John Robertson voted by the fans Nottingham Forest's greatest ever player. He soft shoe shuffled his way down many a touchline to influence games at the very highest level. Quick-witted on the pitch and off it too. An artist with a ball at his feet, but so down to earth as a person. He was such a scruffy dresser that he was nicknamed the Tramp. But this was the tramp who came up trumps.
And we segue from Letter from the Gantry into a rare You Gave Us the Joy segment to bring in John Robertson. Only the second time we've done this, Diogo Jota was the first. John Robertson was unique, and yet so many people had never heard of him. So many younger people now had never heard of him. He was unique in 2 ways for me. He was a fat, heavy drinking, chain smoking winger who wasn't that fast, but he was mesmeric. I would put him up there as my best opposition. Watching down the years to my Chelsea, I would put him up there with George Best in the 60s, with Steve Highway at the beginning of the 70s, and him. 80s, John Barnes. I put him up there. 90s, Ryan Giggs.
Well, he was obviously praised at the Forest end, particularly by the fact that he was, Ryan being very left-footed, John Barnes being very left-footed, of course, as well. There's no problem. Maradona only had 1 foot, really. It's not a major criticism, but John Robertson could hurt you with either foot.
And, of course, scored the winning goal with his right foot coming off the left wing.
Which is quite common, but it wasn't so much so then. He just had this light of foot, change of direction, quick over a very short distance, but most of all, the football brain to know with the ball, once he'd made the chance, to know what to do, what the best decision was. His decision-making was excellent. Of course, he, for all the great moments of the Forest, he said his greatest moment was scoring the winner for Scotland against England with a penalty. He could take very good penalties as well. But he was just so down to earth. If you saw him in the town, you wouldn't know he was a footballer. No. And he didn't proclaim it. There was, I suppose, there was less celebrity about footballers generally. But Robert had no celebrity, really. I was really touched by the way the Forest fans, before the game against Manchester City, the tribute was so heartfelt. And these are a lot of people who've never saw him play, you know. He was a very good coach as well.
Well, I mean, he was Martin
an
O'Neill's...
understated coach.
Martin O'Neill's assistant. So, I mean, some of Leicester's best days before the recent times of the Premier League and the FA Cup, but 2 League Cups, 3 League Cup finals. Celtic, of course, they took to the Europa or UEFA Cup final.
But not for him, the world of the pundit or the newspaper articles or anything, since when he stopped playing. They're such a tight-knit group, those ex-Forest players. They have this club, I think it's a Thursday club, they meet almost every week, you know. So my sympathies, obviously, to his next of kin and those who loved him deeply, but also to those Forest players who've lost one of their own, you know. And that will hit them hard.
I think one of the joys of football that we don't really express enough is that any shape or size can be a success at the elite end of the sport. And I don't think you see that in any other sport.
No, that was always one of the great claims to fame, the world game, you know, played by every country, played by, you know, male, female, any gender, and played tall people, short people, and in Robbo's case, chubby people. And yeah, a game for everybody, which is why it's the world game. And, you know, we celebrate the ultimate athletes as well. But John had something in him that was athletic, in that just change of low centre of gravity, I think, would have helped. And
strong.
Just to get away, strong.
Couldn't be knocked off the ball.
And also ultra determined. I mean, I don't quite know. I'm sure there are people in Nottingham who could tell me now, but what it was like when they two first came face to face, where Cloughie would have looked, he would have known about John. The funny thing, there's one fact about John Robertson, did get mentioned one or twice in the obits, that being a Scot, it was a very surprise when Don Reilly took over the England job. He had a squad of some 80 players he wanted for a camp, and John Robertson's name was on it. Don had to be told quite quickly that even if he was qualified, and I don't think you could qualify back then except by being of the country of your birth, but Robbo would have come nowhere near an England training camp. He was set out to try and beat them, which of course he did. But yeah, just symbolic of, it's just still a wonderful time. I mean, I guess you had to live through it. We're lucky we lived through it, you know. I was close to it because I'm working with ITV, and Brian Clough was a panelist. So, and he was, I've told this story before, but you'd end up in his office after perhaps doing a game where he'd get Peter Shilton to come and clean your shoes, or Trevor Francis. And I don't remember him calling Robbo in to clean my shoes. But
he'd do such a bad job.
Well, I don't know.
I think that what we do talk about sometimes in the contemporary game is the lack of tempo, the time people take on the ball, playing out from the back especially. And one of the great things I think about John Robertson was his ability to play the ball early. So his tempo might not have been in his running, although when he went, he could go, but his tempo was in his mind, and the early use of the ball.
Forward-thinking players. I mean, he would not. I mean, players are discouraged from losing the ball now, so therefore taking players on is a risky business. But he you know, give it to Robbo was one of Cloughie's great, great sayings, really. If we're in trouble, just give it to Robbo. So yeah, he wasn't well for a while, and so it wasn't the greatest shock, but it just brings back those crystal clear memories of somebody very special. On the, as I said about the pitch at Graham College, a lot of muddy pitches in those days, and you had to shift yourself. You had to have some strength to shift yourself and then shift the ball. And a wonderful career, and because he's so humble, really down to earth, there will be generations of people who are wondering what we're talking about, you know. But he's of the era where it's all now on video, and of course the wonderful film Believe in Miracles about Forrest at that time also highlights what he contributed to.
So there's a wonderful tribute to him by Daniel Taylor in The Athletic, and he got friendly with him. I think he's Nottingham himself, Daniel Taylor. And he when he retired, the first thing he did was get a pub and run a pub, and said he did it because he thought that's what all footballers did when they retired. And he later said, "I was much better at football than I was at running a pub."
Yeah.
So,
top guy, and it's
and top entertainer. Absolutely huge quality.
I think the love of Brian Clough spread the love of football, and those who played for him were lucky to have a manager who understood, and also understood that people were different. You didn't all have to conform to type, as long as you did what Cloughy said. I think it probably suited not just Robbo but the squad when they won a lot of games, and often they would go in after the game. What's the next week, boss? Well, we'll see you Friday. And it worked for Cloughy, and it worked for them because they didn't just go away and indulge themselves. They kept themselves tip top because they wanted to be in the team the next week. And why wouldn't you? I mean, what they achieved, when you think about it now, and how well Forest have done to get back to being a Premier League team and being in Europe as well, which is
and can we just point out, having won it twice, they were knocked out the following year was it the semi-final, in a game where it was later confirmed that the referee took a bribe.
That happened a fair bit around
in order to see them out.
But they certainly punched above their weight, that's for sure. And John had a bit of weight, but he punched above that as well. But R.I.P. Robbo, really, really a privilege to have watched the craftsman at work.
Can we just go back to your letter? A couple of things in that. You've actually, as we're recording now, Martin's just come from not a 1-0 Arsenal or a 1-0 Fulham, but a 1-0
Spurs at Crystal Palace. Yeah, it's following me around a bit. I thought it was it was coincidental, really, that going from those two games, which I was going to talk about, and then I had the idea of writing a letter about those games and what I put around it. But then we lost John, and then of course I realised that his great day to go. Even the Scotland game, I think, was 1-0 as well when he scored the penalty. So we all probably think of like 1-0 to the Arsenal. That was the one that it was a big cry, wasn't it, when George Graham was manager? You don't get so many now. I noticed yesterday, because I'm with Neymar talking the day after that, I have come from Crystal Palace on the recording day, that there were a lot of 2-1s. And I think, I haven't checked this recently, but I seem to remember a while ago reading that 2-1 is the most common score in professional football. But in all those games, the goals came, I'm not too sure about the timing of Robbo's goals, but the three that you've talked about, the two that I wrote about, plus today, all the goals came in the first half. There was a special one for Spurs, Archie Gray.
Yeah.
First goal, he's on the scorers list of the clan now, the Clan Gray. And I was told, and I didn't research this, but his granddad, Frank, also scored his first career goal against Crystal Palace.
Oh, really?
For Leeds, yeah. So I can't claim I dug that up, though. One of our brilliant statisticians told me that during the game. It was knocked in from 6 inches, but they're the most satisfying one. And he's played over 100 games, so to get a goal, that's including his time at Leeds as well.
He's played a lot in defence, but
yeah, he has. He played in midfield and was in there. It was a corner goal it was a set piece. We're going to talk about set pieces later, but I think the price of victory is so important to what the real fans know this. The people who come in and out of football probably thinking, oh, well, there wasn't much in that game. But the value of Tottenham, who have now got an extremely good away record, had won one of their last 8. So this was, and Palace, they both lost their last 2. So the value of victory, it was a game, in the festive season where you're thinking, tidings of comfort and joy. There wasn't any comfort, and there was only joy at the final whistle for Thomas Frank. It's a feature that ever since the game started, there've been 1-0s, but there seemed to be a bit of a cluster in my life at the moment.
One of the most mad things in my life is that my daughter's partner is an Arsenal supporter. I'm still coming to terms with this.
Well, you've been very good of you to let an Arsenal supporting producer be part of our gig here, you know. And very, very good he is in our work as well. That's all the lads are.
He was here earlier today. Actually, it'd be quite interesting to see. We need a face from Michael as to whether he agrees with this or not.
Yeah.
He was in this very room earlier today, and he was complaining to me about Gyokeres. And he was
going to say about your career.
He said to me, and he was saying he's just, you know, he scored 60 odd goals in 2 seasons in Portugal, and he's come to England, and he just doesn't look good enough at the moment. Do you see potential?
Yeah, I do see potential because of his runs, his work rate. Mikel Arteta, before I commentated on the game at Everton, I obviously do a lot of research on what managers are saying. He said in several comments about the fact Gyokeres is learning about the game, is that we've got to learn about him, and that we're not making the best use of him. And so that's a work in progress. I suppose if Arsenal don't win the league, then there'll be greater detail analysis. But he fits what they're doing at the moment. He's strong. The team is big and strong, and it's more like the 1-0 to the Arsenal teams than we've had for some time. And it's functional. And they're getting all these own goals as well, by the way, Neil, it's a nightmare for commentators, this, you know. I didn't do either, but you were at the game where João Pedro's sock, a corner from Reece James, glanced off. And they announced that at the ground. I heard it because I was watching on television, that it was Reece James's goal.
But they also announced that the winner was a Nana goal. So.
Right. But Reece, everybody ran to Reece, didn't they? And João Pedro ran off on his own. But
I didn't see the touch until I came home and saw it on television. I didn't see it in the replays on the big screen.
A wonderful colleague of mine, and still I work with him, although I don't work with Sky anymore, Alan Smith. He came up with a lovely line when prompted by Rob Hawthorne, the commentator, saying about knowing it. And Alan said, you just know. When you're a striker, you just know. And that really resonated with me, because if you get any touch, it matters so much more to the strikers to score.
I haven't checked with Opta yet.
All the reports have given it.
No, it's not that. What I want to check with Opta is, did they give Reece James a shot on target? Because it was going in.
Yeah.
And the fact that it went in off Pedro, he didn't shoot on target. It hit him and went in, but it was going in.
I would say it probably will not count as a shot on target.
No.
In the way they do it. But maybe I'm wrong.
They don't do corners.
But what I was going to say to you is we love goals, and I'm a great admirer. It's obviously team goals, long range goals, headed goals, whatever. A goal is a goal, and one of the most satisfying, I can go back a long time to when I was scoring goals, but is the touch in, the ball comes off the goalkeeper or something, you're there just to knock it in. And that means that helps you as a position. You've got into a position because the Archie Gray goal, people will have seen it by the time this goes out. He's on the move, and there's a touch on towards goal, but not going to go into the goals. And he's got, you can see him standing watching, and then he's on the move before the touch. So he's read the touch and he's just flicked it in. And for somebody who's never scored a goal before, that was an amazing piece of opportunism, really. So it suggests if he played further up the field, he might be more prolific. But they're very hard. There was one, Arsenal have got all these goals from own goals, from corners and free kicks, and they're 4 of their last 6 goals are own goals, I think. Is that right? But the Ruta one, that was going in. That's why he headed it, because he couldn't divert it. It just went on from the back of his head. So you could argue that would be Declan Rice's goal,
because it was a shot on target.
Because it was a shot on target. And had he shot from the middle of the goal and it flicked off the top of Ruta's head, it would have been his goal. Yeah.
So correct. Absolutely correct, Martin Tyler.
For once.
Yeah. Michael, our producer, thumbs up or thumbs down for Gyokeres?
Oh,
In the middle.
A wobbly thumb.
Yeah. A wobble. Okay.
Yeah.
Intriguing stuff. That is Letter from the Gantry, and you gave us the joy, John Robertson. Unique. We're now having one of our special feedback segments and covering quite a few topics that we've discovered in the second half of 2025. I'm going to start, Martin, with Alan Lake, who is responding not about his beloved Birmingham, it appears, Birmingham supporter, but about a rant that I had that since Brazilian players have moved to Europe, the Brazil national team has suffered in the World Cup, not least, I think, because of the season being August to May, and everybody's exhausted when the World Cup comes around, whereas the Brazilian season is March to November, and everybody's fresh when the World Cup comes around. And he says, I remember my old man pointing to Dunga in the 94 finals, saying that he never saw Brazil when he was growing up having a defensive midfielder whose main job was winning the ball and protecting the back line. He said Brazil had turned into European style of nation because most of the team played in Europe. Mexico 86, Spain 82 were the last of the Samba kings. Brazil do look as though they're not the same nation anymore. Carlo Ancelotti's got the most enormous job there.
I'm just thinking, why didn't it work in their favour in Qatar then?
It worked in Argentina, Spain.
I suppose so.
Somehow their players have been. They're not the same. They're not the same freedom of expression somehow.
No. One of the best jobs I ever had, and it's a long time ago, was doing Pele's however many goals they decided were official. And so it was a wonderful privilege to see all these Pele goals and try and find some words for them. And I think it just showed, I mean, the pictures were pretty awful. So the teams that you're talking about, based in Brazil, had, and people think about playing on the Copacabana beach. That's a very small part of Brazil. There's masses of Brazil inland where they played on corrugated iron pitches, if you like, and the touch and the ability to play free-flowing football on a bad pitch, I think, set them apart really, because the pitches weren't necessarily great even in the World Cups in the 50s and 60s. So I think it's probably, part of this broader problem of philosophy of coaches and how you play and how the game is, if you like, the lower risk, taking the risk out of football, and therefore being better organised defensively. For all this, we still have plenty of goals. So, but whether the Brazilian players are so pleased, we can't forget, and this is not to belittle the culture of a wonderful country, Brazil. I've been there a few times, and it's a fabulous place. But probably the European stuff is now so regimented that some of it has gone. But they always had, if you like Mauro Silva, they always had strong defensive players, and they're going solid players that could. They didn't just, otherwise they wouldn't have won these tournaments. They did concede some goals along the way. In the Pele final, was that 5-2, I think?
Yeah,
58, yeah. But then they came into England in 66, and there were problems there. Just because you're big and a big nation and you've got lots of football doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the right blend. Has the coach has been right? Here we've got a non-Brazilian coach.
For the first.
And we love Carlo, by the way. We know him personally, and he's a fantastic person. And a very, very good coach. And I would have thought probably of all the European coaches, the one most likely to give them their head,
But Neymar burst onto the scene when he was a teenager. he actually, people forget this, he delayed a move to Europe in order to stay longer at Santos. And then when he finally went to Barcelona, he was very respectful of Messi, he paid lip service and everything. But he seemed to suffer burnout very young. He got a lot of bad injuries, starting with that broken bone in his back in Brazil in the 2014 World Cup. And he got a lot of injuries.
He missed the 7-1, didn't he?
Yeah.
And
that
was one of the most extraordinary games of football I've ever been
But
at.
I mean, you know, I've waxed lyrical on this podcast about Vinicius, who I saw play his first pre-season friendly for Real Madrid ever in Miami against Manchester United. And I think this calendar year he's only got 13 goals. It just seems at the age of 25 as though the world is overwhelming him somehow.
There's so many distractions. I mean, you can't imagine what it must be like to become fated to come to Europe, you know, with all the big clubs after you, and then the expectation of the level you've got to perform at. I mean, it's an unforgiving game, and there's not too much time given to, you know, Hendrik we're talking about recently, and who's hit a bit of a block.
And gone on loan now to Lyon.
Yeah. Well, maybe that would be the best thing for him out of the mega Spanish spotlight. I don't know. I still see a lot of very good players playing that are Brazilian. I think there's been a very good spell recently, and again, Michael, our Arsenal producer, will tell me right. But Martinelli's terrorised some fullbacks recently. You know, and is he going to be, you know, a major player?
I mean, the big issue for Brazil is number 9. Will it be Richarlison? Will it be João Pedro? Because I don't think either of them are real centre forwards or good enough. Or will it be?
Richarlison had 2 goals disallowed today. Actually, poacher's goal, right place, proper centre forwards goals, marginally offside. In fact, the first one he wasn't. He might have been offside. They never checked it because there was one earlier in the move. He could have been offside. So I think he's got a number 9-ness about him, but he was there in the last World Cup, wasn't he? So, yeah, listen, it's such a high level, Neil, that to get, you know, we believe there's a lot of very good footballers cultivated now by the system. It's so much better in England producing talent that England should be, you know, right in the mix. So, you know, you look at, you know, France have been now looking like a real World Cup. Have been a real World Cup team for the last 2 editions. So, you know, there's so much coming. We've done a letter, I think, sort of trying to explain that England haven't been a total failure, but I tried to explain the reasons, having been there all the time, why they came up a bit short, and sometimes very close to being, you know, to get to the final in Italy. I thought they would beat Germany. They didn't, and Germany scrambled over the line in the final as well. So it's the kind of thing, you know, the hand of God, and then, you know, Argentina, we'd have beaten Belgium. At that time we always beat Belgium, so that would have been another. So and Brazil will say the same things.
Yeah, well, France may be the new Brazil for the last 7 finals.
Yeah,
maybe.
No, that's very good.
Let's move on to Andreas, and if I could just ask the producers to have a close-up of Martin all the way through this and see if he blushes. This is what Andreas had to say. One can talk about voices of football, and to each their own regarding the best ever commentator, but I personally am as big a fan of Mr. Tyler as one can get. Born in 89, and I do assure everybody that is Andreas, not Martin Tyler.
1889.
Born in 89. For all my adult life, I've watched football and prioritised finding the channel for which he's worked on any given day, and I still do. There is a certain calm and precision to his commentary that I especially enjoy. In all forms of entertainment, it is better to make the listener or viewer turn up the volume rather than turn down. Martin has even shaped my life in the way where, as a Bergener, and I am an SK Brand fan, with Norwegian as my first language, people regularly think I'm from England when I speak English. I've always rather found a stream for free, than paying for Norwegian overpriced television without him. Please keep doing this, guys. I love your work.
Andreas, if I'm not physically blushing, I am inside, I promise you. It's really kind. And I do think at the end, it said guys, so that includes you as well, Neil. So thank you. It's been a joy to do what you like me doing. So I've had a huge amount of fun out of it. And the only thing I can say is today was my 51st anniversary of my first commentary. And I take every game just as seriously as the first one. And I love doing it. So
and what was the score on the first one?
1-0. And it was the away team that won. So it was that. I never thought about that. And I normally put that on. I spent the whole weekend working out. It was, yeah. Eric Potts for Sheffield Wednesday, 28th of December, 1974. I was going to say 54. 51 years ago, yeah. So thank you, Andres. It's really kind of you. Obviously, working as we do on television, we don't get that much feedback. If we do, it's usually on social media, which I don't subscribe to. And so it's nice to hear. Well, I'm very flattered by it, and thank you.
And thank you to the person who comments every podcast about my interrupting and wants me off.
Sorry, I'll stop.
Right.
You've worked out my assumed name.
Carl McClutchy has left a message. Not enough has been talked about Villa's youth system. Much of pre-season has been played by many of their treble-winning domestic youth team. Villa do not need to go crazy in the transfer market when your youth system is so effective. Now, if you're wondering how they won the treble last season, Villa, their youth team won. The Academy Youth League is divided into Academy League South and Academy League North. They won the Academy League South, and as a result of that, playoff in the final against the winners of the Academy League North to be the national champions. The Academy League North was won by Manchester City. Villa beat them in the final. So that was 2 trophies. And the big trophy at youth football, the FA Youth Cup, was the final was between Aston Villa and Manchester City. And Villa were conquerors again. I remember periods of Villa having really good youth setups. Back in the 1980s, 1990s, the old midfielder Tony McAndrew was in charge of them. They were always getting to the semi-finals.
Well, the one I remember was 2002 when they beat Rooney's Everton.
Yeah.
And they won at Goodison, and I think they lost by a slender. They won well at Goodison and lost by a slender margin in the second leg. So, but they won the trophy, and about 6 or 7 of those players went on to Liam Ridgewell. I was when I remember Liam Moore, Stephen Moore. I can't remember. Maybe they both played. They were. That's the proof of it all. Like the class of '92, you have to get. And in '93, pretty much the same group lost to Leeds in the final, but they all still went into the first team, whereas Leeds didn't have too many of that group that went in. They made careers elsewhere, but not necessarily with Leeds. So, yeah, it's a rich area for getting young talent, and why wouldn't you go to Villa if you scouted to go there? But as I say, to break into the first team, that step up is physical. Crystal Palace in the game I was at today had Joel Drake's Thomas, who's 16, and had he scored would have been the youngest Premier League scorer. He didn't come on, he'd been on in the Premier League, he came on at Leeds. So Palace are pushing through, and at the moment they're needing their youth players because they've had so many absentees, injuries, and they don't have the biggest squad. It is about opportunity, and players can stay too long around the first team that they don't get a game, and then have to go elsewhere. So we know, Neil, because we talk about it a lot, the number of Manchester City youth players who are playing elsewhere, the number of Chelsea youth players who are playing elsewhere. So maybe they'll have to spread their wings.
Well, if you line me up against a wall and said, tell me Aston Villa's greatest ever player in my lifetime, I'm pretty sure I would answer Gordon Cowans, who was the early. He was the early 1990s, late 80s, early 1990s, and won a League Cup or two with them.
We had a commentators team right up to 1992 from the early 70s, and we turned up to play a charity match at Paget Rangers in the Midlands, and Gordon, who was still a player at Villa, played because he loved football so much. And a friend of mine who was a good non-league player, who was sort of half qualified for the commentators team, marked him out of the game in the first half. And I said to him foolishly at halftime, "Well done, you've done so well against Gordon Cowans." He absolutely panicked after that.
Didn't realise it.
He hadn't realised it at all. He just played. And sometimes that's, you can be over. I think even as a commentator, well, you could say, well, they've done this and done that. Watch what they do. One of the pieces of advice I always give to young commentators, and there are plenty of them now, and good luck to them all, is watch the game. Don't be taken in by reputations. Don't be taken in by systems that you think the teams play. Watch what actually happens. It takes a lot of confidence to do that. You have to be in the job for a while to trust yourself to do that. But
my point about Gordon Cowans is he came through the youth system at Aston Villa. He was a true villain.
Yes. I've got to say Andy Gray, of course, is the greatest. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble.
Well, did he come through the youth system?
No, he was signed from Scotland, wasn't he?
Yeah, but
not as a youth player. No, he's played first.
In that case, it was definitely Gordon.
One of their own, is this expression, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. Josh Geary responded and said, I don't really watch too much football anymore, but it's nice to hear two such great people talk about it with a little bit of rationality and respect. There isn't much of that at the moment, while also having a really good time. These are also really well edited and produced. So a shout out to whoever is behind that form doing such a great job. You didn't write that and give it.
I've got a few better.
Josh Geary, thank you very much.
Yeah, which one of you is Josh Geary? Thank you, Josh. You're absolutely right, by the way, because we would be sitting doing this stuff in a pub with nobody listening if we hadn't found three men and a camera. And somehow it's escalated from there. And without them, we are nothing. So I agree with every word you said. Yep. It is really well edited. Whether about the two such great people, that's another. That's up for grabs. But it is, and boy, do they work hard, because the turnaround. We're doing this every week, and because we believe that once you start something, you should continue on it. But our job finishes really when the episode and Neil says goodbye. But then the boys start their work. So it's great. It's really great. Can't say enough good about them. They're excellent.
A Cardiff City fan responded to the Jay Bothroyd guest appearance. I have the exact same epilepsy as Jay, same medication, same dosage. Also lived my life the exact same way, just got on with it. Mental hearing this now as a Cardiff fan also. If people didn't listen or see that episode, his description of life with epilepsy as a top professional footballer and not letting the clubs know because he was terrified of their response.
And having a long career. And we pointed out, and I've seen Jay a few times since, I don't know whether he's accepted our take on it, which was, had you not thrown the shirt that hit Don Howe, it wasn't aimed in the Youth Cup game against West Ham, and you stayed at Arsenal would have discovered your epilepsy and the insurance would have been a problem. And maybe, not necessarily, maybe you wouldn't have had a career of any length at all by keeping it quiet and getting on with it, which is what the Bluebirds 1927 says, is it's the way, isn't it? And Jay can't remember some of the games he played in. Now, how much of a risk that is to your health, you'd have to check. But he's bright and alert and on Sky Sports and doing very well as a media man. So it was a very powerful program. I didn't know the sheer details of. He was very open with us, bless him.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. Yeah. Katie Watson responded to the Gary Lewin episode. Gary Lewin, of course, the great legendary physio medic, and now looking after Arsenal women. Gary is such a lovely, knowledgeable guy. Loved hearing about women's football and the lack of research on women's health when it comes to football. This is an important topic that gets overlooked. And he was really quite, how can I put it? It left you in utter disbelief at his disbelief at the lack of good information or even good research into this issue with the women picking up so many.
Yeah, it's really important.
Anterior cruciate ligament rupture.
What I say, if you go back to the starting of men's football, there was no knowledge either, but there was medical science wasn't what it is now. So there is no excuse now for the research not being done. I'm sure it probably is being done. Maybe we don't get to hear about it. We probably will when it comes into the public domain, and we go back to that subject again. But it is. Katie Watson's absolutely right. We mustn't overlook it. And I don't think Gary, with people like Gary Lewin around, it won't get overlooked, I promise you.
A couple of responses to the recent one with Seb Hutchinson, the commentator, from Power Flower Trains and Planes. Always enjoy Seb's commentaries. He has authority as a football commentator, a great voice for the job, and certainly, as far as I'm concerned, the leading light at ITV Sport. And running away 1990, that was the last time Liverpool won the league before 2021, 1990, I don't know that. Running away 1990, love hearing Seb on commentary. Agamyang! That will do for England, I think was his Aguero moment. Iconic piece of commentary, still gives me the chills watching it now.
Yeah, excellent observations. It was great to have him, and he made a big effort. He lives in Lincolnshire and came to the Kingston Kitchen where we do the show. It was really nice. Commentators all together very rarely have a long conversation. It's usually about, have you checked so-and-so's have done their hair differently, or they've switched numbers, or they've got different squad numbers this season. Or today we had a player who wore, it was Jed Spence, wore one orange boot and one yellow boot, which was, I have seen that before in Brazil. We were talking about Brazil earlier. There was a big forward in the early 80s called Serginho, who played in the World Cup.
Yeah.
And I went to Brazil for Channel 4, I think, and we covered the final of their domestic final, and he wore different sponsored boots. So my response when we saw that Jed Spence was two different sponsorships,
Yeah,
I'm sure that's not the case.
No. They should write a song about it. They could call it Oranges and Lemons.
Oh, yeah, very good.
The final piece of feedback this week is from Sean Sweeney, Leicester's biggest supporter in the USA, who just messaged to inform us that Leicester have won the league since Arsenal last won it, have won the FA, Michael, producer, Arsenal supporter.
Yes.
I don't know if he's giggling or crying. Leicester have won the league since Arsenal last won it, won the FA Cup since Arsenal last won it, won the League Cup since Arsenal last won it, and he's thrown in, won the Championship since Arsenal last won it.
I mean, Arsenal didn't win the Championship to get in the First Division, as every Tottenham fan listening and will know. It's 100 years and 100 seasons for Arsenal, 100 consecutive seasons in the top flight. And how they got there is still a matter for investigation. It's one of those cold cases that the detective should revisit again, you know. Very dodgy, but it happened. And at Tottenham's expense, of course. This is part of the reason why the rivalry is so bitter, from Tottenham's point of view anyway.
But Leicester, I mean, it's extraordinary when you look at it like that, but it's true. Last won the league, the FA Cup and the League Cup since Arsenal last won each of them.
that doesn't reflect the signs in the Emirates Stadium round the top. But the last, still 2004 is still the last one with the Premier League up against it. And of course, they haven't won the Premier League since they left Highbury. But they have won the FA Cup since they left Highbury, a few times actually. So,
but not since Leicester last one.
No.
No. Brilliant. Thank you all. Keep your feedback coming. We'll have these little segments every so often. Things do get read, and we love it. Thank you. Right, we're going to finish with a segment that's a one-off. Farewell 2025. Is everyone ready? Here we go. 2025. Martin, Tyler, your most undervalued player.
Yeah, I've spoken about this player before, and I know him. We sort of chat in tunnels, and we've had a couple of longer conversations over the years. And I've actually taken the temerity to say to him, which I'm not really entitled to say to him, but he took it well. I said, "You don't realise how good you are," but I think more recently he probably has. But he never plays the 90 minutes, and he's always often in the starting lineup, but very rarely does the 90 minutes. But he is the rarity in today's football. He's a right-footed right winger, and he's Jacob Murphy, whose quality of delivery for other players is, I think, by far the best in the Premier League, because very few right-footed players play on the right-hand side. But his ability to pick out a cross, and if say Alan Shearer was playing up front for Newcastle, I think they would be seen as a pair because of the delivery. When Alan Shearer won the Premier League with Blackburn, he had Stuart Ripley on one side and Jason Wilcox on the other, and they were told to cross. If you drew a line from the edge of the penalty area out to the touch line, to get into that space and cross from those places. Well, Jacob does it but he also does it from deeper as well. And it's just a marvellous delivery. And I think it stands out simply because no one else is really doing it. I can't compare him to anybody else, the way the game is played now. He doesn't cut in and whack it a goal with his left foot. And I guess if he played on the left, I think we've mentioned this before, if he played on the left, then he'd come in and hit his right foot. So I said, "Have you ever done that?" And he said, "No, I was playing with my twin brother, Josh, and he did that."
Yeah.
They started at Norwich together. And that was a lovely line. So, but I just think that he's not coming towards the end of his career, but he's played a long time at Newcastle now. And I think his assists are probably as high as it's ever been. And then there are chances. There was one the other day for Voltemade. I think somebody had the shot was saved and it came out, and so you get no credit for it if the shot's saved and then somebody else knocks it in the net. But the ball from Jacob was the one that opened it up. So I still think, and I had a good think about this because it's sometimes personal thoughts do come in, and we're entitled to do that, of course. But he still is one that I'm not sure. He's not always I don't know what the Newcastle fans think. The one thing he doesn't do, which I think he could do a bit more of, is get in at the far post when the ball comes from the left.
He whacks a few in from distance.
But he once told me that he said he just puts his head down and hits the ball. Yeah. The harder it is hit, the better the chances. So anyway, Jacob, keep doing what you're doing. You're a great person, and I think a very fine footballer.
Does he play any international football? Or could he sneak into the England camp for the World Cup?
Well, I can't see England wanting that. I mean, if Dominic Calvert-Lewin suddenly said, "I'll play for England again if I can play up front with Harry Kane," and then we needed wingers to put the ball in, not come inside and shoot. But I think Bukayo Saka's probably booked that space, isn't it? Really? So, and he's of the other and the far more common way of playing football these days.
I saw quite a lot of Jacob and Josh Murphy playing for Norwich youth team, because they got to Youth Cup semi-finals and finals in successive years, and playing for what was then a reserve team as well. I saw quite a lot of them, and they were both good players. They were both good players.
Josh hasn't quite made it to the top, but he's still having a very good career.
My undervalued player is Newcastle as well, central defender, Fabian Schär. He's 34 years old now. I first saw him playing for Basel in the 2013 Europa League semi-final, and he oozed class. I don't think he's ever become an out-and-out world-class player, but it was obvious he wasn't going to stick around in Switzerland for long. But he's been in Switzerland's team and in all the World Cups ever since. And he went to the Bundesliga, and I think he was one of the first signings for Newcastle when they got the Saudi ownership and money coming in. And people talk about Newcastle's defence, and it has been their mainstay under Eddie Howe, but they don't talk about him. And he lost Botman as a partner about 18 months ago to a ruptured anterior cruciate ligament. Dan Burn moved in alongside him. Didn't make any difference to him. He just went on playing his game.
And Dan Burn went on to play for England.
Yeah, and Dan Burn recently has been injured, and he's had all sorts of people playing next to him. He is, in 2013, people weren't playing out from the back, but he did. He was a footballer right from the beginning when I first saw him, and he's been a footballer ever since. And I think he's still playing at the top level. I think he's still an outstanding player, and I think he's off to another World Cup in order to show the best of himself. And people don't talk about him, but he turns up and he plays well every game. Yeah, he's got a mistake in him. Yeah, he's not maybe got the absolute highs of Van Dijk last season or some of the ones going back, but he's a good player.
Got a great shot actually as well. He gets goals from outside the area.
Yeah.
And we're gonna do the joke. My one unintentional. It was intentional as it turned out. You're Gary Neville, so I say Fabian Schär started his working life in a bank, and you've got to say, how did that come about? Fabian Schär started his working life in a bank.
How did that come about?
That would be telling.
Boom!
Bank tellers, you know? Yeah.
Gary didn't get it.
No, but it was in the heat of battle. In the truck they got it, but it was sort of said, and then I realised it wasn't meant to be a joke, but it turned out to be one. Yeah. You listen, people are thinking, what on earth is he banging on about? Bank tellers is an expression that probably not used very much,
no.
Like bank clerks, you know?
Yeah.
So
now it's just bank shutting down.
Well,
right.
He's probably got a good bank account now, Fabian. Haven't played in England for a long
time.
I bet.
Farewell 2025. Most improved player.
Yeah, this is again a difficult one. I've gone for Dominic Szoboszlai at Liverpool. That's not to say he wasn't a good player beforehand, but the circumstances have transformed his value to the team, I think. First of all, because the loss of form, if you like, and some of that, of course, we know is down to the tragic events around Diogo Jota, but Trent Alexander-Arnold going. So Dominic is a midfield player, a responsible midfield player, international with Hungary many, many times, and found himself playing at right back. So not really pretending to be Trent, nobody could be. He's a one-off type of footballer, but doing a really solid job at a time where that position was a really big problem for Arne Slot. And then recently he played wide right instead of Salah when he was out of the side. So he's sort of plugging gaps, but in his normal position in the middle of the field, he's got a goal in him. He's got great energy. That's not, as I say, he's just won a title. So to say he's improved, I think they've asked more of him. That's what I would say. And he's met every challenge expertly. And it's been at times difficult for Liverpool this season. It would have been a lot more difficult if he hadn't produced performance after performance. So,
and he has scored some great goals.
Yeah, and he gets important goals, and he gets in the right areas. That midfield, he's obviously a bit of competition in there. He's got to fight to win his place, especially with Wirtz now arriving and now starting after getting his first goal. It's following on a success when you lose a key player to that excess. It's always going to be a gamble, and all the the issues around Van Dijk and Salah at the start of the season or during the summer, a bit unsettling. But I still think that to cope with the wonderful way that Liverpool and Wolves paid tribute to Diogo Jota. It's just a reminder of how near the surface the grief is, and it was tear to the eye stuff just watching it. And in the midst of that, Dominic Szoboszlai has made himself an outstanding footballer at a time of some crisis. I don't use that word lightly.
I've gone for two.
You usually do.
Yeah. Jeremy Doku. I first saw him play for Rennes in the Champions League against Chelsea, and he was like he was like a mini Sean Wright Phillips, twirling and spinning and pirouetting, and not always taking the ball with him. And at first you thought, God, that pace and that desire to get to the penalty area, it's going to kill us. And then you thought, nah, it's not show. It's not joined up handwriting. This season it's been joined up handwriting. He is, and he's still only 23, something like that. And he's at Manchester City. He's torn teams apart on his own. He's absolutely torn teams apart. And all that fear that I had back in whenever it was when I first saw him is now unfortunately back to the surface. I think he looks a really impressive and entertaining player. He's one of the great entertainers now, Doku.
And strangely enough, when we talk about John Robertson, he's the modern version of that position, really, isn't he? Yeah. He stays wide. That's the way that both Brian Clough and Pep Guardiola in different eras wanted from their wide players.
But I'm going to throw in with him my man, Robert Sanchez, goalkeeper at Chelsea, because he's come in for such stick since he's joined Chelsea.
Only from you.
No, not from me. I'm the one who's always defended him, in fact. Right. But admitted that while he's capable of the top saves, he is capable of making errors. And all his errors, to me, were never handling errors. They were never saving errors, or very rarely. They were all errors of decision-making. And he's cut that out of his game to a large extent. And he's been helped, very interestingly, by the issues Chelsea have had with defending long throws and set plays. And they've started pushing 2 or 3 people upfield when they're facing these predicaments. And that's given him the space to attack the ball. And he's cutting out long throws himself and corners at an incredible rate.
And it is a marvellous thing for a team to have a goalkeeper doing that and trusting that that's the way they train, that's the way they're, that is the modus operandi for the coach, that we want to clear the way, best way possible for a dominant goalkeeper who's not shy of doing it, who's not going to backpedal. Might make a mistake on it, but they're the kind of mistakes that you tolerate.
Right? But he's had he's my player of the year so far at Chelsea, and he's from me saying if I were in charge of a struggling side, he's the kind of goalkeeper I buy because he'll win you 10 points a season. He's now somebody who won't lose you 10 points a season at the same time because his decision making has improved so much. And I think he's one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League. Well done him.
He's not even the best Spanish goalkeeper in London, though, is he?
I would argue with that. He hasn't got the team in front of him that David Raya has. I would argue with that. Although the Spanish coach wouldn't, because Raya's in his squad, but not in his team.
No.
Unai Simone from Real Sociedad.
Simon
is still the Spain goalkeeper. Is he?
Athletic Bilbao.
Athletic Bilbao.
You're fine.
Basque. Same thing.
Yes.
Yes. Right. Next, Farewell 2025, your best summer signing.
Well, this was quite easy, actually, given there were a lot of summer signings. But from what we've seen, and even to this very day, Granit Xhaka has come back into English football with Sunderland. It was a deal made possible, I believe, clever deal done by the Sunderland ownership, recognising that Granit is a businessman himself as well as a fine footballer. And I think there's been some joining together of not corporations but organisations to welcome Granit as a businessman as well as a footballer. I'm hearing that secondhand, but there's no reason to doubt that. But the way he is, I mean, Sunderland, it's extraordinary what they've done. They've been in the record books in the Premier League in more recent times as the low scorers and low points tallies and things like that. And to find themselves, as we speak, I think they're 7th in the table. They were close to being 5th if they'd beaten Leeds. But Xhaka made the goal. He's just somebody who's a beacon of knowledge on a football field. His decision making is excellent. When you think back to the sticky times he had at Arsenal, he's now much more in control of his own emotion. And it was always a surprise that he did get into those sort of dark places, because he's a very, very professional man, and that would go against the grain of Granit to be, to let himself down like that. But that's long gone. And I think for one player in a team game, and this is a new team put together, how the recruitment guy should be well up on the bonuses for what's happened as a result of who they brought in. But he's a sturdy operator who can play, and sometimes they can't play as much as Granit can. His passing is excellent, he's appreciated, he smells danger, and he's a leader.
And he's Swiss. And to have 2 Swiss in this list with Fabian and Schär is quite extraordinary.
Yes.
Little Switzerland in the Premier League.
But then we did this completely independently, except that I mentioned 2 or 3 players that Neil immediately put into his list. So I had to look elsewhere, but it is independent.
Oh, God. Storyteller at heart, always a storyteller. I've gone for someone you didn't mention, Ryan Cherky, as the best summer signing. A lot of teams have spent a lot of money on playmakers this summer, and Cherky was cheap by comparison and easily the most glorious by landing, and just typical really of the Manchester City setup. Not all their signings have gone in, Doku in the past few years, and been a ray of light immediately, but this bloke has lit up the Premier League with quality, with vision, with goals, with assists, creativity. And
but recently he missed some games, didn't he? At the start, when he was obviously injured. He came in before the Club World Cup. You and City did some extremely clever pieces of business, so that suddenly your squad was multiplied in a good way. So yeah, he's a lovely footballer.
I think he's going to be one of the big deals for a decade. In the Premier League. 2 more to go. Farewell 2025, your most entertaining player.
Well, this is a list really, because I am championing the return of the long throw. It's not great for commentators because the little nicks on and flicks on, you're never quite sure who got the last touch, which is always a test for, with the goal scorers, and we want to get those things right. But I think I've obviously spent a lot of time away from what people know that I do, coaching in non-league football, and we've always had long throws. We've always seen the value. Our scouting reports, and they do exist in non-league football, will be watch out for him. He's got the long throw, and defending against it, and the lack of a Robert Sanchez is often exposed in the lower leagues, that the goalkeepers, and if they do come, they're usually a bit too ambitious, and it's not an exact science, of course. So I think Michael Coyote, Kevin Schär scored against Chelsea, took the one at the end. That's a couple from Brentford. Jefferson Lerma, Chris Richards at Palace. Ethan Ampadu against Palace. 2 goals came from his long throws. We've had recently Manchester United beat Newcastle on the Friday night, the one Boxing Day Premier League game, for a long throw from Diogo Dalot that was half cleared, and Patrick Dogu smashed it back, and that definitely goes down as a long throw goal. Kyle Walker, who threw the ball well for the goal in the Euros for Bellingham scored, I think. We talked about the time, his first England long throw goal since 1982 when Steve Coppell did it against France in Bilbao. Kyle's throwing him in for Burnley. I just think it does take up time, but I think now it's happening more regularly. The preparations don't have to be quite so long. I was working with an ex-player, Matt Holland, today, and we were talking about having a 60-minute clock, so that when the ball goes out, that the game everybody gets 60 minutes.
Glenn Hoddle always wanted that.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and Matt's a very shrewd observer of the game. I think it would be very interesting to see how long a game would last on a 60-minute clock with all the stoppages. But then there'd be no wasting time, because there's no point. The clock would stop. And so if someone goes down injured, the clock will stop. So, but I think it could be quite well longer than 90 minutes, really, if it's done like that. So I think it's worth an experimentation. But I just think it's something that the game has had at lower levels, and now the value of it. And the physicality of the game has dropped a little bit because of the possession and the passing philosophies. But this is where, I'm not saying people go in and smash people in the face and use elbows and things like that. It is just show your strength. And
I think it's more than that, because I think that the beauty of the long throw is some of them are really straight as an arrow, and come
float. The others are floaty, aren't they?
Yeah, you get the floaty ones, but then you get the ones that go all the way up to space and drop horizontally, bang, but you can't clear them. You cannot clear them. You can't add them away.
No, if they're coming downwards, you can't. Yeah. If there's pace on them, you can. But I just think it doesn't happen all the time. I mean, your club don't do it. Quite categorically have decided under Maresca they're not going to do it. But generally, I think it just adds a bit of people draw a breath. Oh, here it comes.
Well, my club, famously won the FA Cup for the first time with a long throw in 1970. Ian Hutchinson.
Yeah,
great
David
one.
Webb. Yeah. And that was a throw, by the way.
That was the longest throw of them all.
Yeah, I've never seen anything quite that. I remember Steve Watson had a good career. It was a Newcastle player. We used to do it until they banned it with a somersault.
Oh yes, I remember.
And that would be fun. Why is that banned? Why can't we?
Why was the back flick, the Coventry back flick free kick banned?
Yeah,
because the miserable bastards who run football try and kill our joy, and we won't let them. Yeah. My most entertaining player, I've gone for Eberechi Eze. He won the FA Cup for Crystal Palace. And then he went to Arsenal and scored a hat-trick against Tottenham. I mean, what could be more entertaining than that? But his goals are often just sublime. They're absolutely sublime. He scored a few against my club that I haven't forgiven him for. But he does it. His career really, I think, has not been the best for consistency, but has been the best for consistency of quality over a year of just scoring.
Well, I mean,
outstanding
to come up from Queen's Park Rangers in the first place, he had a career at Queen's Park Rangers. Yeah. So but of course he should have scored, controversially, in his very last game for Palace. But your referee at Chelsea ruled it out, didn't they? When they said Mark Gay had fouled in the wall. Chelsea v Palace.
Yeah,
that was his last.
That was a correct decision. But but it was harsh on Eze, but it was a correct decision.
That was as correct decision as the Morgan Gibbs-White being knocked out of the way so your Ryan Cherky could score at Nottingham Forest. That to me was a foul, but I don't know. Anyway, listen, we're not debating the foul. I saw Eze's big moment. I was lucky enough to commentate on the semi-final and the final for Palace, and he's a talent. And I hope, whether there was more suited him the way that Palace play with Arsenal. Maybe he's got more. It's difficult. He's an Arsenal fan to go, and allegedly phoned up Arsenal and said, "Look, I'm going to Spurs. Do you not want to take me instead?" That is a show of strength about him. The other thing I know about him, which I think is intriguing, is he plays chess. And I haven't come across too many footballers. And he plays against Michael Olise, who also left Palace a year. They became friends at Palace, and they play online chess. And I think that's football has its chess elements, doesn't it? Its strategy.
And
so
because
so it's just a personal thing. I like that kind of backstory.
Because he's a technician with vision, he's walked into, looks so comfortable in the England setup. Yeah, in Sheffield.
It's come to him at the right time. He's 27 or something now, isn't he? I think. So I think that if it happened to him younger, it might have been more difficult for him. But he can look after himself on the field, and I guess in the dressing room as well, which is an important part of, as we all know, for stepping up into the higher level. As I know, coming into this kitchen every week.
And we finished Farewell 2025 with your best player of the year.
Well, it is now the third Manchester City player in this section, but my first. And it is Erling Haaland, because the hardest thing is to score goals. Yes, it didn't lead to a trophy-laden season last season. Whether it will this season, maybe not. But it's just astonishing. If you look back, as I do, being a sort of lover of the history of the game as well, in the days when Dixie Dean scored 60 league goals, and they played 42 league games as opposed to the 38 now. But
have they moved Dixie Dean's statue from Goodison Park to Hill Dickinson?
I haven't seen it, but I'm sure they have. But of course, Goodison Park. No, maybe they haven't. Goodison Park is still in use. Yeah. Yes, and I went to the Everton Arsenal game, as I mentioned in the letter. And I met a few Evertonians who'd been to see a women's game at Goodison Park recently and loved it. But then there were also lots of pictures in the programme of the stand. Some of the seats have all been taken by the season ticket holders as souvenirs of their time. So whether it's standing room only at Goodison now, I don't know. But no, it's maybe, I'm sure as time passes, the right thing will be done by it. But, those crazy games where there were lots of goals, they're a thing of the past, but Erling Haaland has made them a thing of the present. He's astonishing. His ratio of touches to the ball to goals is unbelievable. And he doesn't need, we were talking earlier before we came on to do it, he occupies defenders so that the other players, Cherkys and your Fodens and the other array of talented players they've got can do their stuff. But when a chance is needed to be taken, I mean, his efficiency, he is, I don't think I've seen a footballer built like him ever. No. So he is, I suppose, the ultimate 2025 footballer, and he should be my best player for that reason alone. But I just think he bestrides everything else. There are lots of talented footballers. It's a great league. And proud to be associated with it, as have been from the start, and English football generally. And he's got Norway to the World Cup as well, which hasn't happened for a while. So let's see how that pans out for him in the USA. But he might be going there. And Michael's looking at me there. He might be going there as a Premier League champion again. Of course, he might. I totally disagree with you. Good.
Because Erling Haaland did not have a good first half of the year. And on that count, and on the count that Ousmane Dembele won, before you pull me up, won the FIFA Best of for 2025 when he barely didn't play.
Well, Mo Salah
in the second half. Yeah.
Mo Salah
I'm saying
deserves a
Mo
mention.
Salah. Mo
Yeah.
Salah would deserve it to me more than Erling Haaland, because
Yeah,
what
well,
he
just-
did in 2025 won Liverpool the league.
Just count up the next highest goal scorer over the 2025 at the top level of football, and then you can disagree.
But
if you don't.
I'm not going for either of them.
No.
I'm going to go for someone who didn't win anything,
And someone who lives around the corner from you, Neil.
And
allegedly.
and who played well from January to December. And I wouldn't put him forward as a player of the season ever, because I think you need to win things, and he hasn't won something yet with his club. But I think for the effect he had on his team and for the quality of his performances through the 12 months, my best player of 2025 is Declan Rice. And I think that he's also, as I've said on here before, the player who's proved me wrong, because he's gone from centre-back to number 6 to number 8. And I thought, what are you going to number 8 for? You haven't got those attacking qualities. Well, he has.
You have a much broader brush with your view of the game. I'm a strikers man.
Well, I think Declan Rice has had an outstanding time since he's gone to Arsenal.
He's a splendid footballer. He's a splendid example of all the best things about football, and he's never out of line. When he was sent off, obviously it caused huge ructions, but he did deserve to get sent off against Brighton. He won't do that again, I promise you. But he is an iconic figure in our game, and Chelsea let him go.
Oh, don't. And let Michael Elise go.
Oh yes, yeah.
And failed to keep Jamal
Musiala.
God, I was just enjoying the joy of football there, and he's turned me bloody miserable again. Martin flipping Tyler.
I don't often get the last word, as our friend who was sent in the about the interruptions. Yeah.
Hey, that's it for 2025. To everybody from both of us,
Happy New Year.
have a great 2026 as well. Ta-ra. Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody. And just keep supporting us, and we'll keep going, because heck, at our age, we need a bit of support to keep going. So we're going through 2026, aren't we?
We are.
Subscribe and Patreon and Substack.com, and don't get too drunk on New Year's Eve.
And before we go, the highlight of this show, and it should have been mentioned earlier, is Neil's Christmas shirt. If you're listening, it's a brown and blue check.
Christmas present from my son. It's bringing the Neil Young out of me.
Yes, as opposed to the young Neil, which is
Yeah.
long gone.
Yeah, in his case as well. Yeah.